Welcome to the 2024 Eliot Memorial Reading, which is generously supported by the T.S. Eliot Foundation. Tonight's gathering was also made possible by the incredible staff of the Carpenter Center for the Visual Arts, to which we give thanks. I also wish to give a shout out to poet, translator, and designer Chris Madison, who went above and beyond to create the stunning broadside that accompanies this occasion. And finally, I'd like to express my profound gratitude to my colleague Mary Walker Graham, without whom none of this occurs. She is a poet and artist who works tirelessly on behalf of other poets every single day. So please lift up your hands and thank her. I'm Christina Davis, and I'm going to give some brief opening remarks, and then I'll hand over the mic to our true introducer this evening, Rosa Alcalá. At such a tortuous, tremulous, and divisive juncture in our country and in our world, I cannot think of an artist who is more crucial to this moment and to our collective passage through it than Cecilia Vicuña, whose lifelong labor has been devoted to, as she puts it, becoming calm. In a textual sketch of hers by that same title, which I might add sits beside my desk next to a bread and puppet banner that says, "Resist business as usual." In that sketch, the preposition calm, C-O-M, which has come to be synonymous with the internet and with the ravages of dot-com capitalism, is transformed into an unbreakable compass whose fiery pole stars are compassion, composition, communion, and camaraderie. One might imagine carrying this instrument and its cardinal directions into battle, a battle in which the real enemy, at least to the powers that be, is the one who removes the war. We are in the presence tonight of a poet of active pacifism, who has consistently refused to weaponize language, who has tirelessly sought to disarm the grammars of hate and deception by revealing words not as weapons in an endless agon, but as beneficent instruments that bear witness to a latent, living, and vital relation. Her work awakens us to an epigenetic thread and persistent exchange deep in the valley of breath that resists contemporary boundaries and relentlessly indetermines and reimagines our limits. In this way, Vicuña's work reminds me of Denise Riley's inimitable 1970s text, Marxism for Infants, in which she observes, anything one is thinking meets. So too, Vicuña's poetics reveal the force of meeting, the rhizomic reaching and interweaving beneath even the most trenchant of our divisions, and not only the tragic political antagonisms, but conceptual divides between the realms of visual art and poetry, speaking and singing, intellectualism and belief systems, thinking and feeling. We are in the presence tonight of a singer whose every vocable enacts meeting, who's got, to quote Alice Notley, a soul on her tongue. We are in the presence of an activist who has fought to remain peaceful, open, steadfastly receptive. We are in the presence of a luminous thinker who refuses to reduce thought to censored dreaming, whose intellect is a solarity, a small sun that constantly rearises, an artist whose weavings and wordings return us again and again to the moment of the poem as the unalienated. And how do I know this? How do I intersect with this being? Through yet one more force of meeting, known as translation. In this evening's introducer, Rosa Alcalá, we are privileged to have one of the foremost translators of Vicuña's work and vision, who has been in a vital dialogue with Cecilia since 1996. Her tremendous translations remind me of what Fred Moten once observed. If you want to encounter the truth, hold someone else's hands up to your ears. With great tenderness, dignity, and care, Rosa's award-winning translations do just that. Please welcome her.
Thank you, Christina Davis and Mary Walker Graham in the Woodbury Poetry Room for inviting me to introduce Cecilia Vicuña for this T.S. Eliot memorial reading. Cecilia Vicuña, a Chilean New Yorker and multidisciplinary artist, has in recent years received the kind of recognition she has long deserved. She was awarded, for example, a Golden Lion for Lifetime Achievement by the Venice Biennale in 2022, and in 2019, Spain's prestigious Premio Velázquez de Artes Plásticas. She's had a series of widely acclaimed solo shows at the world's most prestigious cultural institutions, among them the Guggenheim Museum and the Tate Gallery. And in 2018, she published a new and selected poems that made available again, or for the first time, decades of her poetry. But when I think of Vicuña, who I've known since the mid-90s, I don't think of her recent recognition. I think of a steadfast poetics rooted in her origins, but always committed to a collective future, one which informs and unites her large-scale museum installations of raw wool and thread, her delicate assemblages of refuse called precarios, her drawings and paintings, and her poetry and improvised performances called quasars. It is a poetics that took shape at the foot of the Andes Mountains, at the beach in Concon, in her childhood bedroom where she first divined words that opened to her, revealing their inner forms. It is a poetics indebted to ancestral memory, to the indigenous Latin American tradition of weaving, the pre-Columbian writing system of knotted cords called quipus, and the literary and artistic traditions of the Americas. A poetics energized by Salvador Allende's popular unity movement and its promise of radical change. It is also a poetics violently tested and given purpose by the Chilean military coup that took place on September 11th, 1973, while she was studying painting in London. The words that had once joyfully opened to reveal their origins and multiplicities in a mutually pleasurable exchange, words that held as much promise as Chile's future, were shattered by the insurrection and by her subsequent exile. As she once told me, and as I quote in Spit Temple, the selected performances of Cecilia Vicuña, quote, "After that moment, I have lived mainly in English. The coup disintegrated my language. The disintegration of my speech began when that axe blow was inflicted upon us. If we are to be made into litter and cast-offs, then fine, I assume that position. I am garbage and a cast-off, and that is my language, the exploded fragment," unquote. After the coup, Vicuña lived for a time in Colombia before moving to New York in 1980 and has since divided her time between Chile and New York. Throughout her migrations, Vicuña's multidisciplinary work has sought to center what is marginalized, erased, disappeared, forgotten, on the verge of extinction. In many ways, I see her work as trying to return again and again to that playful, erotic exchange with language and other materials, piecing together the remnants of that original pleasure and hope derived from youthful exploration and collective action with the aftermath of various historical and ecological axe blows inflicted upon us and inflicted by us. An obsidian mirror to the Anthropocene, her work reflects back at us a non-totalizing and ever-shifting map of what we have wrought, as well as the glimmering possibility of collaborative repair at the edge of such precariousness. Her most recent of more than 30 art/poetry books, Libro Venado, or Deer Book, translated by Daniel Berzutsky, is an exquisite assemblage of writing and drawing in which she unfolds, quote, "a line of thought that began to evolve as I realized deer dance poems and art were related to flowers, sacrifice, and the renewal of life in all continents, from Africa to Europe, Siberia, and the Americas," unquote. Dear Book describes an ecological system in which the ancient and the actual, the plant and the poem, the individual and the community coexist in an interdependence of desires and are continually in flux. In Vicuña's telling, the deer, following the stream's seductive song, sinks its mouth in its waters, each thirsty for the other. The bee's desire for the flower's nectar is first stimulated by the nectar's own desire to be, quote, sucked, licked, dragged, tongued, gobbled down, end quote. A plant, quote, hears light and weaves a tiny bag, a little thylakoid sac to store the light, end quote, which will then be translated in the process of photosynthesis that Vicuña calls the first poeticizing. And poetry and art, not only are they not solely dependent on the singular I, the individual, but the death of bees, bats, moths, birds, any of the pollinators is also the death of poetry and art. As such, Dear Book is also a book about translation in a world that resists translation, that refuses to recognize or change its destructive trajectory. But more than translation, the Dear Book is about the heart and engine of all transnesses, the fragment tra, which implores us to listen to, attend to the sacred string between all things. Quote, the way we place ourselves in the listening is the door, end quote, Vicuña tells us. In the introduction to Spit Temple, I wrote that Vicuña's improvised performances were the key to understanding her artistic ethos. And I think they still are. But after reading Libro Venado / Dear Book, I've come to understand that tra, and this is T-R-A with the acute accent on the A, that tra lies beneath all of it. The tra dissolves the poem so that it falls off the page and becomes again like the insect to a flower, the deer to water, the plant to light, a relation, a coming into being. Tra enters the poem's sack of light to transform it. In all of Vicuña's work, Tra, like Vicuña herself, sings to us, desiring that our collective humid breath and gaze fertilize the space in which we are gathered. Join me in welcoming Cecilia Vicuña.
Didn't know why I knew your sons. Did you know you know you? Did you see I told you? Did you know you just you should have so told you. Did you know
¿Cómo se apaga? Welcome to the moment. Everything is alive around us, in us, with us. I grew up in the Vietnam era, at the time when newsreels were beginning to appear in our TV. Recently arrived TV in Santiago de Chile. Bombs raining on babies, disemboweled babies. Bombs raining on kids, running naked in the street. I knew in that moment our turn would come. I was in that knowing our turn would come. And even before it came, before the bombs rained on us, I painted this strange scene I saw in my dreams. A Gothic cathedral in New York with 4 red letters hovering above the church. These embodied 4 red teeth. Just 4 red teeth in mid-air. When I saw the image in my mind this morning, I thought 4 como los 4 jinetes del Apocalipsis.
I had to look it up. How do you say jinetes riding on the T as a vehicle? The red T, the T by herself with more T's, another T, another T. 4 giant letters T. I looked it up. Who are the 4 horsemen of the apocalipsis? El hambre, la guerra, la peste y la muerte. Hunger, war, the plague and death. When our turn finally came in 1973, when the US decided we had to be done away with, the killings were justified with lies. My response there and then was to create, not true. My response was to see an image. I saw suddenly in my room, this was in London, it was 1974, perhaps 4 or 5 months after the coup. I saw first the word verdad, transformed in palabra armas language into dar, ver, to give sight. Then the word palabrarma came into being. She created herself. She said, we are the only weapons allowed. Words are the only weapons allowed. And the third became mentira. Mentira meaning lies. Mentira in Latin is the mind, la mente, torn apart. I looked it up in English. There's no etymology in English. It's just uncertain origin. Uncertain origin. I wonder if we are now not the 4 horsemen, but the 4 billion humans, apocalypsados, eclipsados, eclipsed by our desire not to see what we're doing. We are creating our own vehicle of death, hunger, and war. I suddenly remember I cannot watch the newsreels anymore on TV. It's just pure bullshit. So where do I see my news? In the Instagram. Fuck you, Instagram. What am I doing with you for hours glued to this horrifying machine? Until I find things like this. Guess who is the speaker here? As I emerge from the dungeon, the truth seems less discernible. The truth has been attacked, diminished. I see more impunity, more retaliation for telling the truth. That is Julian Assange speaking after being so-called freed, not really freed, but at least free enough to imagine freedom again. Then I stumble upon this one. In my mind, I remember it as I am not afraid of climate change. But I looked it up again. I don't care most about climate change, says the speaker. Floods, hurricanes, wildfires, none of the above, he answers himself. It's the consequential wars, conflict over fragile and declining resources, violence over scarce food and water, the beat dress, rise, cheese, cheese. I remember then, when Mother Teresa came here, she didn't say exactly these words, but something along these lines. She said, how come the richest nation on earth is the poorest in love? I felt, how about the poorest in self-knowledge? In understanding who we are? How come we don't see what we're doing to us ourselves, to others around earth? And then I came down to complicit, from complicit. In Latin, that word means to fold together. Think of the English ply, to fold. I imagine, how about turning around complicity, the city of compliers? How about if the becomes the plier, to turn around this way? The as you were saying in Latin, means with. All of this is with, forever with, forever with. I don't know if we have a lot of time left for our being together here, but I thought of bringing the memory of another quasar, that quasar I just did for you. I wrote this morning. But this one I have here, originally was like 20 pages, of course a bore. But I extracted just 3 pages for you. It so happened on November 10, 2016, the day after the electoral college confirmed Mr. T as our new president. I was at the Illinois State University taking part in a fantastic exhibition called Strange Oscillations and Sympathy Vibrations, created by Kendra Pite. Kendra invited a bunch of us women artists to write about another bunch of women poets of our choice. And so we were gathered together, and the last thing we imagined was that on the day of my performance, this news of the choice of the Electoral College riding or pushing away the popular vote, that, as you know, was not for that gentleman. So I began. She is the one that doesn't exist. The Pachamama, mother of space-time. As you know, we've been gathered here to read the reading, to read. When I pronounce it, it sounds like read. Read me from evil. Read ourselves from the terror, the fear we endured in the last 2 days of infinite time. Time outside time to read the moment I had to begin this way. I went around each person doing this, holding my hand to each one of them. There were some rowdy kids at the back of the little theater, and they started to crawl near me, near me, until they ended lying down at my foot like little creatures that would not miss a single breath of whatever I was saying. What had brought them forth was this gesture, this hand doing that. What was that? I began extending my heart and my breath, that is to say, my hand, to receive something from you, perhaps desire to go on. I felt the world had ended, and I remembered the Popol Vuh, the book of dawn of the Maya Quiche that begins after the world has ended. The world is beginning again. There has been a huge disaster caused by the self-aggrandizement of the one that is called the hero, who thinks self-aggrandizement is the thing. The world has come to an end, and therefore it begins all over again. And it begins with the word nothing. The potential and soul of it all. It says life is semiotic. All semiosis is alive. Did you know bacteria read each other, sing to each other, seeking quorum sensing, to devise when there is enough of us around so that go together and change matters? Semeio, 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 the seed of meaning being born. To make a sign. A sign is the moment, Charles Peirce says. The moment of signification is to prehend the future. The future word. The root of the future word is same as physis. The physical. It depends on death. Only death renews life. Only death renews life. And think of this at advancement of civilization. To think your enslavement is freedom. That's the need today. Subvert that version. Colonization spreads through naming. Imagine a rebellion against hypocrisy. A belief, a new belief in the beauty of behavior, a vision of the living whole as beauty, the beauty of act. In that moment, another coup was taking place. A millionaire's coup in Brazil to allow for the destruction of the Amazon. A coup to destroy all living things, all living things. They say we are in a time unlike any other, that we're gifted with this charge, a responsibility for the future of Earth. Imagine then a species that benefits all species. Okay, and no. I suppose there are a few more things. How are we doing with time? Can we go on with some crazy stuff? Okay. So there's too much trouble lately, so there are more troubled poems. And I thought when I learned that this place was having a little exhibition of palabrarmas, I thought, yes, of course, I have to run through these words. And so the word that is most hurtful in this moment, perhaps, is a word I would never had imagined would be part of our lives, which is the word martyr. As you know, if you grow up in a Catholic country like I did, the martyrs were the Christian saints. And we never heard any use of the word martyr until now, where the sense has been reversed completely. As you know, by now I always look up these ancient roots. And what did I discover? That the Latin martyr comes from the Greek martus, from the stem root mastu, meaning witness. 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 And that's because I had written this. The cities were martyred The temples were martyred. The schools and hospitals were martyred. The doctors, the teachers, the students martyred. Orchards, gardens, trees, leaves martyred. Olives, capers, oil martyred. The air, the water, the dew, the sea waves, the sand, all martyred. Even the stones martyred. The insects, the fish, the birds, the people. The newborns, the not yet born, the babies, the kids, the mothers, the grandfather, the grandmother, the father, the uncles, the aunts. How could our heart meet the heart of the martyrs? The martyrs dust. How could we meet them face to face and say it was me? It was my money, my taxes that sent in the bombs. How can I face you, martyred at dawn? And now I will invite Rosa Alcalá for a change in our mode and tone of mourning, for a different tone. But we have to go through the following after I had finished the dear book, which we will read together. I learned something so incredibly beautiful, which is, I don't know if you have studied this issue, that the leaves have something that is called the stoma. And the stoma is like a little pore. And through this pore, the leaf receives the light. But the new research that did not exist at the time I was writing the dear book is that the stoma only opens at the beginning of dawn, when the birds begin to sing. So the leaves can hear the song of the light emerging, and that is photosynthesis. So my hair stands on end under the sweater, pushing the sweater up like that because of that storm. And another part of the transition, still Instagram, it said this phrase: the indigenous are rain, the indigenous are rain. It is not credited, so I know, don't know who said that, but it's exactly true. In the desert I felt the rain within as you spoke of it, the humid humanity of this earth. And so now we move to the venado. Bien. Es un libro gordito, mucho monito. Aquí está. Sí. El poema es el animal hundiendo la boca en el manantial.
This is translated by Elliot Weinberger. The poem is the animal sinking its mouth in the stream.
La flor es el sexo de la planta. El poema es el sexo del idioma.
The flower is the plant's sex. The poem is language's sex. That's Daniel Berzutsky.
Templo del tamboreo, tempo del tamboreo, erotismo del abdomen, la abejita golpea su abdomen contra el polen, se unta, se llena de polen, orgasmo de polen, éxtasis de polen.
The drum's tempo. The drum's tempo, the abdomen's eroticism, the little bee bangs the pollen. It smears, it fills up, pollen orgasm, pollen ecstasy.
El néctar nació antes que la flor, un exceso de savia, una excrescencia lo hizo ser. El nectario inventó la copita de néctar y el néctar mismo. La flor es un palacio, agüita dulce y mineral, aroma del sueño, el deseo del dulzor dio origen a la flor. Pensamientos del néctar, alimento de moscas y mosquitos, abejas y colibríes, mariposas, polillas y abejorros. Voy a ser chupado, liqueado, arrastrado, langueteado, engullido, gustado. Se correrá la voz de mi sabor. Voy a ser amado, llevado. Vendrán por mí, vendrán por mí.
Evolution of nectary. Nectar of ions, the nectar was born before the flower. An excess of sap and excrescence made it be. Nectary invented the nectar cup and the nectar itself. The flower is a palace, sweet and mineral potion, aroma of dream. The desire for sweetness gave rise to the flower. Thoughts of the nectar, nurturing of insects and mosquitoes, bees and hummingbirds, butterflies, moths and bumblebees. I will be sucked, licked, dragged, tongued, gobbled down, enjoyed. Word of my taste will spread. I will be loved, carried. They will come for me. They will come for more.
Matemática del vuelo, matemática de la muerte. Soñé que las abejas sostenían el bosque, volaban llevándolo en sus alas. Uno a uno los árboles se caían. Hasta ahí nomás.
Mathematics of flight, mathematics of death. I dreamt the bees upheld the forest. They flew carrying it in their wings. One by one, the trees fell.
And to add to something that you said in the introduction about the tra of transformation and of translation. Because I come from a double line, a European line and a native indigenous line, but of course both are from Africa originally, but it doesn't matter. What I want to say is that the place where my nearest ancestors came is the desert of the southern portion of the Atacama Desert. And these people were decimated in the 17th century. And so I suppose because I was deprived of all their universe of knowledge and understanding by this extermination of their culture and language, is I have adopted throughout my life different traditions. So I am a spurious collector of knowledge from everywhere I can find it. Instagram, a bus, a street, you, anyone. Be careful, no. And so this creates a sort of magnet, and it puts me in a lot of trouble too. And so I encountered this spurious myth created in the Sonora Desert. It is a sort of alternative version of a myth as is told by the men. This myth told by the women line. And it says that the deer are really the creators of poetry. And that it was a woman who hid themselves. No, look what I said, themselves. Interesting. Etra lady, no, I'm joking. She is hiding under a bush and she hears the language of the deer singing and she translates it. And that's the birth of poetry. Composición de la vida, composición de la luz. La hoja es la traductora de la luz. La clorofila es la sangre de la planta. Seth Lloyd, un sabio que estaba aquí antiguamente en MIT, dijo, la clorofila es un sistema cuántico, está en varios estados a la vez. Solo así puede sintetizar, fotosintetizar. Y Walt Whitman, ¿cómo se pronuncia? Dijo, una hojita de hierba no es menos que el viaje de las estrellas.
Composition of life, composition of light. The leaf is the translator of light. Chlorophyll is the blood of the plant. Chlorophyll is a quantum system. It's in many states at the same time, said Seth Lloyd. Walt Whitman said, a leaf of grass is no less than the journey work of the stars.
And even though this is a book muy gordito, very fat, this will be our last dear poem. And it is, I was telling Rosa a few minutes ago that when I began to understand this question of the leaf being a translator and the deer being a flower, how come that the deer is a flower in Africa, the deer is a flower in Siberia, the deer is a flower in South America, and also in the Mexican-American way, all the way into the southwest of the US. What is it about the flower and the deer being one? So that put me into photosynthesis. So this is about la cosecha de la luz. La planta oye, ve la luz y teje una bolsita. Saquito tilacoy para guardar la luz. Transmembrana bailarina, la planta no bebe agua, bebe electrones, luz y sombra alternada, goza el fluctuar eterno del cielo. Baila en porosa alegría transitiva, un mecanismo unificado y sin radiación. Sintonías y reacciones al interior del órgano del cambio. Sienten la luz y ordenan su fuerza inestable. Parecen tornados, lípidos, bordadores de luz y sombra. disco, asambleas al interior del pigmento, orquestas de moléculas tejedoras cultivan el entre preciso que atrae la energía.
As I said in the introduction, the majority of this book, 99.9% of the texts were translated by the wonderful poet and translator Daniel Borsutsky. Harvest of Light. The plant hears the light and weaves a tiny bag, a little thylakoid sac to store the light. Transmembrane ballerina, the plant doesn't drink water, she drinks baby electrons, alternating light and shade, enjoying the eternal fluctuation of yes and no. It dances in a porous, transitive joy, a unified mechanism and without radiation. Harmonies and reactions inside the organ of change, they feel the light and organize their unstable force, spinning pairs embroider lipids of light and shade. Co-assemblies inside the pigment, orchestras of Weaver molecules cultivate the precise between that attracts energy, the negligible difference between far and near. Molecular speech is extremely sensitive to short distances. Contact without contact, the union itself. The syntax of a language emits undetectable virtual photons, the poetic efficiency of transmission. In a zone that violates the known laws, the transferred energy is inversely proportional to the sixth sense of the distance between the giver and the receiver. And this indicates quotes that are woven into the text from various sources.
Gracias, Rosa. And now, to honor the beauty of Rosa, Rosa, as you said, Cristina, has been like more than a dark light for me. Because in the Andes, for us, just as in the, let's say, European, Eurocentric universe, light is the thing, for us, darkness is the thing. Because darkness is the origin of light. Darkness is where it all begins and transforms. So, Rosa, la oscurita, es la madre de estos poemas. I wrote these poems in the 60s when I was an illegal teenager. And I say illegal because some people say that this kind of language was not known in Spanish. We shall see. José, ¿cómo era la lista? No, I have it. Luminosidad. This poem is at the same time a painting, and it is a portrait of the man I loved at the time. Luminosidad de los orificios. Incluso puedo contarles algún cuento, hablarles de mi novio, dulce ladrillo de piel, de origen indio y apariencia volcánica, con 7 cráteres a lo largo del cuerpo. Uno, por ejemplo, tiene labios y es el cráter de la paciencia, el más cómico y decidor. Además, de él sale la poesía, encanto primordial de mi novio. Hay 2 cráteres, en cambio, de los que no sale nada, sino que entran cosas. Se llaman las entradas de la música y son algo rugosos, vulgarmente llamados orejas. Son los aparatos más suaves del amor, los que mi novio no se lava por temor a entorpecerlos o rayarlos como quien destruye un disco. y con él sacaba una fuente de milagros. Quedan otros 2 cráteres cuya función es no solo dejar salir algo, sino que dejar entrar. Quedan sobre un órgano mojado y hacen tss, tss cuando funcionan.
The brilliance of orifices. I can even tell you a story, talk about my boyfriend's sweet brick skin, its Indian origin and volcanic appearance, site of 7 craters, each with its own characteristics. One, for example, has lips and is the patience crater, the funniest and most witty. It also releases poetry, my boyfriend's primary charm. There are 2 craters, however, through which things do not exit but enter. They are called entrances for music and are somewhat wrinkled, crudely known as ears. They are the softest love devices which my boyfriend never cleans, afraid he'll dull or scratch them like someone who destroys a record and with it a fount of miracles. The function of the last 2 craters is to allow things to exit and also to enter. They cover a moist organ and go fus, fus when functioning. To them, creo que no leíste la última parte.
It's true, I forgot. It doesn't matter. Read in English.
To them, we owe the grace of aroma and funk, which is why they are called awakeners or indexes of sensitivity. And fortunate is he of the fully developed awakeners. And they call my boyfriend Lucky Fortunato, even though his name is Claudio.
Pobrecito. I bet he hates that poem. Now, this poem that we're going to read now, you know, in Chile, we had a student uprising a few years ago, and then one of the leaders of the student uprising became a president of Chile. He's still the president, much attacked and assailed, but still our president. And I met him, and the first thing he said is that this poem was his favorite poem, and that this poem was really the true political program that he believed in. You will see. Okay, I had to read it, sorry. Shall we skip it and just read it in English? Yeah, okay. ¿No? ¿Hay gente que habla español? Hay hartos. Bueno, muy bien. Entonces, misión se llama. Te propongo hacer un viaje alrededor del mundo, acreditados como misión investigadora del gobierno socialista. Tú y yo seremos los besadores. Besamos mejor que nadie, habiendo desarrollado una técnica minuciosa y altamente estudiada de cómo besar más perfectamente. No hay mujer que bese como yo, ni hombre que bese como tú. Los besadores besaremos a todas las personas que encontremos para descubrir quién sabe hacerlo mejor y aprender, por tanto, su técnica, para practicarla y enseguida traerla a nuestro país socialista, que será el país de los besadores. Eso fue escrito en 1971.
This was written April 1971, research project. I propose we take a trip around the world to be officially designated Socialist Government Research Project. You and I will be the kissers. We kiss better than anyone, having developed a meticulous and carefully researched method for perfecting the kiss. There is no woman who kisses like me and no man who kisses like you. The kissers will kiss every person we meet to determine who does it better and learn accordingly from their technique. We'll practice it and without delay bring it back to our socialist country, which will be the land of the kissers.
No, no, we're not even close to achieving that. Okay. And I am a walker still now. And in Santiago, I used to walk everywhere, cross Santiago, in one direction and the other, walking. And this poem, written in 1970, is an actual garden that I saw. Sí, se me olvida ya. Bueno, lo casual. La idea de encontrar lo casual como algo que estaba cuidadosamente preparado por una mano anterior que encadenó sus formas estéticamente para explicar un jardín desordenado, que está en el punto preciso de su desorden, un gesto sin consumar, que se agita levemente sin que se sepa qué va a hacer de él. La indeterminación, la musicalidad del movimiento de algunas hierbas abandonadas a sí mismas, doradas de sequedad, a causa de una emoción que sufrió su dueña, que antes se ocupaba tan tiernamente del alelí y ahora ha dejado que todo crezca y solo visita el jardín para dejarlo languidecer. Azaroso y muelle, todo se ha cansado y vive por casualidad.
Chance encounter. The idea of coming upon the unexpected as something carefully arranged by a prior hand that linked all its forms aesthetically to explain a disordered garden at the height of its disorder, a gesture not yet carried out, gently stirring with no way of knowing what will become of it. Indeterminacy, the musical sway of certain grasses left to fend for themselves, brown and parched, consequence of an emotion the owner suffered, she who so lovingly tended to the wallflowers and now has let them grow wild, who visits the garden only to let it languish, precarious, given to its fate, all has become weary and by chance lives.
Entonces, this is the last poem of the evening, and it is un aviso económico, classified ad. I always dreamt of placing poems as classified ads, and I haven't done it yet, but I may still do it. Why not? You know, I'm sure it could get some weird responses. So this one is the announcement I plan on placing. La compañía de los sueños. La compañía tiene por objeto realizar los sueños nocturnos del cliente. Si usted tiene un sueño, escribe a la compañía que se encargará de reunir a todos los personajes del sueño en el ambiente natural del sueño. La compañía no garantiza la total realización del sueño. El azar no depende de ninguna compañía. La compañía no falseará los sentimientos de ningún personaje por medio de la instrucción. Si usted ha soñado que es besado por un antiguo amante en la cumbre de una montaña, la compañía devolverá a su amante a la cumbre de la montaña, pero usted será besado.
The Dream Company, classified ad. The company's objective is to fulfill nocturnal dreams for its client. If you have a dream, write to the company who will see to it that all the characters in your dream be gathered in a natural dream environment. The company cannot guarantee total realization of the dream. Chance does not answer to a company. The company will not re-educate any character to falsify emotion. If in a dream you were kissed by an old lover on a mountaintop, the company will place your lover on that mountaintop once again. But you, will you be kissed? Muchas gracias, amigos. That's our end. Gracias, Rosa.
Gracias, Cristina. Gracias, Mary. And of course, these are only my ideas, not Harvard's ideas. And gracias, amigos. Thank you so much. Gracias.
Thank you so much for that tremendous offering. Thank you to all of you for coming. Please join us for a brief meet and greet in those awkwardly placed chairs up there. Please, I invite you to buy a book or a broadside, but if you cannot afford to buy either of those, that should not prevent you from meeting our guest tonight, because the entire momentum of this evening is toward meeting. Thank you so much. Take care.